Yeah, alright. I'm Jack, the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. And this could be the most research I've ever done for a show so far. So much so that I've actually got a book I could mention about it, and I will. It's a book by a guy called Richard Zacks, and it's called An Underground Education. It's a pretty nice book, maybe even close to a perfect book if you forget about uneducated guesses in how to date an antique table, a lover's guide. But this guy that I'm going to talk to you about, you may not have heard him by name, but you'll know him as in sort of reference, because I bet whether it was at school or on a Sunday afternoon watching telly at your parents' house as a kid, or even those films recently with Robert Downey Jr. in, everyone's has seen or at least been aware of the existence of a character called Sherlock Holmes. Now, Sherlock Holmes has a sworn enemy, Professor Moriarty, and did you know that Professor Moriarty is based on a real life criminal who was probably more outrageous than Professor Moriarty was ever portrayed to be in the films or TV shows? Now, with small ties to the original social influencer that was J.P. Morgan, Henry J. Raymond, real name Adam Worth, is one of the best criminals I've ever heard of. Now, I know it's bad to be rating criminals, but he has been dead for quite a while, and it's not like he were kidnapping, raping and murdering people for the fun of it. He was a calculated supervillain. I'm not sure who I would consider the best criminal to be, though, which is a good question, isn't it? Let me know in the Discord if you've got the Discord. Let me know who you think the best villain ever is, the best like real life bad guy was. You might think it's like Tony Blair. You might think it's David Cameron. You might think it's George Bush. You might think it's Ted Bundy or Andrew Ticketillo. Yeah, it could be any of them. H.H. Holmes, he was pretty fucking dark. But I think what's most terrifying, really kind of obvious when you think about it though, is we will never know who the best criminal is, ever, because they'll never exist to us. They'll either be that bad and when they get caught no one can be told that someone like that exists, or they'll be that good at what they do that they'll never get caught. So they'll never actually be a criminal, because even though they've broken the law, they've not been caught to be breaking the law. Anyway, Adam Worth was referred to as the Pinkertons, and the Pinkertons, as anyone that's played like Red Dead Redemption will realise, or anyone involved in American history, the Pinkertons was this sort of agency that I think sort of preceded the FBI almost. They'd go around trying to catch bad guys and investigate them and that. But they referred to Adam Worth as the most remarkable criminal of them all. And it looks like he was always a bold guy. As far as I can tell, his first scam was to repeatedly sign up to the Union Army for $500 at a time. And from my readings on the time, it refers to a few thousand as a lot of money back then. So it's fair to assume that a few $500 would add up to a sizable amount. And even now, it would, a couple of grand now is enough to get a small business going really off the ground, I would have thought. But imagine what one of the most intelligent people to ever exist could do with that. At 5'5" and with no definitive birthday to speak of, this guy would go on to do things that Rockstar leads could only wish that they had thought of first. Like, who knows, someone from Rockstar could be listening to this, and imagine if Rockstar made like a GTA 6, but it's set in the past, maybe in the 1800s, and you just go about stealing paintings, bonds, money, trains and that. How good would GTA 6 be? Obviously that's never going to happen, but in all honesty, I think some of Adam's crimes would be hard to emulate in modern times. There's a good chance as well that some rules and laws may even exist purely because of the existence of this fella. And I don't think that even if they were to put some of Adam Worth's crimes as missions in Red Dead Redemption 3, GTA 6, or even in if they made a second Bulworth Academy, Candace Cain and if they made a second one of them, the crimes that he did, you would never believe. You'd be like, this is a stretch. It'd be even more harder to believe than that the submersible level, I would have thought, on GTA 5, where you go and rob the submarine and then just basically give it back, and you're like, it's hard to believe that anyone would do this. Most of Adam Worth's crimes are exactly like that, so you can kind of see where they've got the idea for the mental ideas from. Even that last bank robbery that you do on GTA 5 where you can choose to mine through the floor, that was actually one of Adam Worth's crimes. He rented out a barbershop, or bought a barbershop next to a bank, and then dug down and burrowed into the bank vault next door and robbed the money from there. He was nuts, mate. He was the original game changer. He was either a genius or there was possibly something in the air or water that he was somehow avoiding. Like I think it was in the 30s, 40s and 50s throughout the USA and the UK, there was a lot of lead in petrol, which means it was the fuel that was being burnt by cars, which apparently led to an increase in aggression amongst pedestrians and people because they were breathing in this lead, and supposedly it affected the brain chemistry and made people who was around then a lot more aggressive and angrier. So maybe he was just avoiding whatever that was, because no one else really seemed to be doing all the mad shit he was doing. Maybe Adam Worth, though, was the original Red Pillar. It seems he was born to a poor family, and although he managed to cash in on repeatedly signing up to the Civil War, which, as we all know, a war is just there for rich people to basically sell the lives off of the poorest people of a community, and to make more money by selling guns and ammunition, and even selling the lives of those people to the other army, or, you know, that's all a war is, isn't it? A war is a money making scheme. It's to sell guns, transportation, get land, steal crops. And he managed to make money off of that, and it's always taken advantage of the poorest people in society. So I like that he managed to do that, and that was his first thing. You know, that's quite a big thing to do. But he did end up having to go to war, and he fought in the Civil War, and he ended up, after about 2-3 months, he became a sergeant. So it's clear that he's quite good at what he does. He's just a fucking clever guy, and he can follow the rules if he wants. He understands what's going on around him. But luckily for him, turns out he was written off as killed in action. He was KIA, so he walked away, obviously, as you would. So in the eyes of the law, now at this point, he's dead. He no longer exists. And also his name had been changed from Adam Worth, which was W-E-R-T-H, to Adam Worth, which is W-O-R-T-H. So with very little of himself left, he's not got his name, he's not got a life, he's dead, you know, and there's no real record of when he was born either. So he could do whatever he wanted, and he did. He really did. For the next 40 years, Henry J. Raymond, founder of the New York Times, as he liked to be known, would always have a trick up his sleeve. Now, he didn't actually found the New York Times, obviously. The guy died who founded the New York Times, and he just took his name and title and pretended to be him, like a fucking mentalist. Imagine doing that now. Imagine trying to do that now. Imagine trying to be like, oh, you know, imagine Alan Sugar dies, he passes away, you know, he gets a nice death, he passes away in his sleep or whatever, and then you just go about saying to everyone, I'm Alan Sugar. I know that I was, you know, 60 odd a couple of years back, but now I'm 24. It's not gonna, no one would believe it. This is what I mean. There must have been something in the air where people was just numb or completely blind to what the real world was around them. It's fucking bizarre, mate. Now, I don't know if you heard my Here's How the other week on Here's How to 10 Ways to Make Money. If you haven't, go back and listen to that. But I reckon Mr. Worth would have definitely have given some of them a go. Like, I tried to make them be as fucking stupid as possible, or wrong, or, you know, perverse, or in any sense. But he definitely would have given them a go, mate, if he'd come up with them first. Or I don't think he would like to do it if someone else had come up with the idea, or if I'm deadly honest. So, after about half an hour of skim reading, here's some of the jobs that Adam Worth has had. And they're in a kind of order, but then they sort of all blur into one. So he started off for about a month and a half. He was a department store clerk. Then he was a fraudster, I guess, because he was defrauding the US Army, the Union Army. And then he became a soldier. Then he got promoted to sergeant. He then became a pickpocket. And then not long after he was being a pickpocket in the city he'd moved to, he then became a gang leader for a group of pickpockets, which shows, guys, that if you're good at something, one, don't do it for free, two, get other people to come and do it, and always leave room for growth. He was a burglar, a bank robber, a store robber, a jewel thief. Now I know what you're thinking, they're all very similar, but a burglar I see as someone doing houses or homes or estates. A bank robber robs banks and bank vaults. A store robber just robs things from a store, from a shop, either be it from the till, the cash register, or stuff off the shelf. And a jewel thief, you're thinking, oh, he just robbed a jewellery shop, but he didn't, mate. He literally just robbed jewels, and it's a good little story. He took a lot there. He was the leader of a criminal network, an underground criminal network. He was a forger, a smuggler, and that's not even all of them, mate. He was always up to something. Now, he seems to have operated throughout North America, Europe and Africa, which for the 1800s is amazing, in my opinion. That goes towards him being the best criminal, because he was... Imagine how hard it was, like, they didn't have air miles back then. They barely had fucking boats that'd get you around the world, mate. And imagine how long it would take to get from North America to South Africa, mate. That's a fucking journey and a half. Or from the UK to South Africa, that's a fucking journey. Even America, just going across the Atlantic to, you know, fucking between America and the UK, wasn't really done much. So he was doing really well, mate, to be travelling this much in the 1800s, in my opinion. Like, it's just unusual, innit? Like, he had such freedom as well. It should be noted that his son went on to become a Pinkerton officer, which is terrifying. Not because there could be like a private investigator with access to the brain power of Adam Worth, but the concept of a master criminal's child taking a career in the opposite side of crime, purely down to an agreement made between Worth and Alan Pinkerton, I think was the founder of the Pinkertons. And even though he's the founder, he's not even the Pinkerton that Adam Worth sort of sold his life story to. When I say sold his story, it wasn't for like book publishing to that, it was just sort of for his freedom and that. And one of his most heinous crimes is actually used as leverage in that. And one of his most heinous crimes doesn't even make sense for being a heinous crime, just in the way that it was executed, though, makes it incredible. Because he managed to make an agreement with a Pinkerton his whole job was to catch him. There was a whole department set up just for Adam Worth, and even when he turned himself in almost, he still managed to crack a deal, mate. He's mad, mate. Like, it just shows the charisma or power that Adam Worth had. Now, that gets me thinking, innit? Do you think some people just emit something that allows them to be manipulated or more believable than other people? Like some form of pheromone or vibration that alters the brains around them. It sounds far-fetched, innit? But if you think about certain notable people, it seems very possible, most of whom seem to stem from America in one way or another. Although Adam Worth was from Germany and from a Jewish German family, he did grow up in America, though. So I think about cult leaders, though, and like Jim Jones. He had some form of superpower, he must have done. Like, can you imagine how hard it is to sell spider monkeys door to door? Like, I know I've probably mentioned this before, it's one of my favourite things to say about him, and just favourite thing to say generally. This guy used to sell spider monkeys door to door, and he used that to fund a cult, which is fucking genius in itself, and it shows that there's a different way of thinking, doesn't it, to the regular world. But let alone the difficulty of convincing someone at their front door, what you need, mate, is this scabby old spider monkey. They've managed to convince a group of people to join a new church, and then they've encouraged them people to kind of evangelise that church by travelling around the country with them, and then finally order them all to, penultimately take them all to a jungle in Guyana, which I think is in South America, and then finally order them all to top themselves, mate, at his say-so. That's power, mate. That's manipulation. It's power. It's not X-Men shooting fucking fire from the palm of your hands or palm out of your wrists sort of power, but there is definite power in some people, I reckon. Anyway, though, this week we're not going on about cults. This is all about Adam Worth, and I suppose with his ties to journalism through his pseudonym, I think that ties him more to Superman anyway than a mutant from the X-Men, or maybe even Batman, mate, because it looks like he made an awful lot of money and didn't really do bad stuff to the working man. But I guess you could say that Batman was kind of evil anyway, an evil businessman, because he's just going around beating people up. And I bet Bruce Wayne's got stocks in the fucking local hospital, and I bet a lot of criminals, in Batman, don't have health insurance, and he's beating them up knowing that, and purposely not killing them as well, so they have to fucking pay their bills, and then they get sent to hospital, and then they basically get enslaved, mate, because they can't afford the bills, so then they're in debt and they need more crime, and keeps Batman in a job and all, doesn't it, just giving himself something to do. Anyway, like, he could have ties to Superman as well, because Clark Kent worked in journalism, didn't he? But I suppose so did Peter Parker, and some of them, he was a photographer, so he could be like Spider-Man, but Superman seems a lot more fitting. Superman does seem quite fitting just because of how he was and how he did it, and he was, I don't know, it's just bizarre. It's a crossover between Superman and Batman, Here's a song anyway. The song's Wrote My Way Out by Nas, Dave East, Lin-Manuel Miranda and Aloe Black. I'm going to play you a remix of that a little later. Seeing as we've got a guy that took stuff as his own, I thought it'd be fitting to have an original and a remix in the same show. Adam Worth didn't just steal his pseudonym from the founder of the New York Times, though. He was also gifted someone else's name, Napoleon's. Being as he was such an important, powerful figure and only 5'5", he was a pretty small guy, but again, something he used to his advantage. During a crime with what seems to be his regular heavy, one of his right-hand men, if you will, Junker Phillips, coming in at around 7 foot tall and built like a brick shithouse, Junker was the walking stepladder every little person needs. Using both his and Junker's stature to their advantage, Adam was able to break into a gallery at midnight. Well, I'll set the scene rather than just rattling it out. Imagine it. There is a 7-foot giant behemoth of a man with his friend who is 5'5", isn't it? Looking like a sort of like a. He'd look like a child, wouldn't it? He'd look like a father and child walking down the road on a misty evening, misty night, about midnight apparently. So imagine the mist is setting in, and you're in London as well, so you got the odd splash coming from the carts, from the horses, and then you got he's just going round a couple of corners, and every time he's on the corner, he hears a little Cockney prostitute yelling out, I'll toss you off for 3 shillings. 5 shillings for a blowy, or whatever the going rate was back then. You go a little bit further, the Adam Worth and Junker Phillips walks a little bit further towards William Agnew's gallery, and he's confronted by a lucky man. Now this lucky man's ahead of the curve, and he's like, do you want some sunglasses, boys? You don't. Do you want some Bing? And then do you want some sunglasses, boys? So yeah, that is actually where the first lucky man comes from, you see, inner city London in the 1800s. And it turns out that Adam Worth actually helped to take lucky men around the world. Later on, he travels to Africa and throughout Europe in his life, so he actually spread the lucky man all throughout them continents. I mean, that's unfounded, if that may or may not be true. But anyway, he gets access to this gallery that's owned by a man called William Agnew. And I looked a little bit into William Agnew, and it turns out he was gifted this title of baronet. And then that was passed down to one of his recently deceased descendants, who also he dabbled in politics for UKIP. So that raises some questions, innit? Either in the portrayal of UKIP in the media, or it raises the questions about the true intentions of UKIP, I guess. But also, what was his great whatever fucking Billy Boy Agnew up to back then? What if Adam Worth what if he only diddled the bad people? Like Deadpool or Venom or Robin Hood. The painting that Adam Worth stole was probably going to find its way to the Morgan family, because apparently Junius Morgan, the father of J.P. Morgan, was planning on buying it for J.P. Morgan. And what if Adam Worth just didn't like the idea of the rich and powerful being able to just do whatever they wanted purely because they were rich? What if he liked the idea that he could do more than them without the wealth as such, purely just from being smarter than them? What if he was just a rebel? Someone who was smart enough to fuck with authority and society and pretty much everyone he met if he wanted to. It does seem, however, though, that Adam Worth knew the art of crafting a deal, but I don't think he ever hurt anyone physically, so it would appear he had morals. His crimes were mostly bloodless, no stabbings, no shootings. He also was quoted as saying something along the lines of a intelligent man has no reason to carry a firearm, or something like that, or intelligent men shouldn't carry firearms, something along those lines. And what if he was? Well, I mean, no, it does, doesn't it? It does. It's not what if it does. It makes him an anti-hero of sorts, doesn't it? By today's standards, if he was in a film, he'd be an anti-hero. But what if he was actually a superhero? And that's why he used different names. Like, I know I've already mentioned Superman very briefly, but something completely random about Superman is that Superman was partly responsible for the breakdown of a chapter of the KKK. Anyway, someone managed to infiltrate the KKK and learnt the code words in the secret language and started leaking that information, if you like, through the radio adaptations of Superman, either as the names of the villains or as ridiculous impact noises. So instead of saying like kabam, kabamo, and like wham and shlung, noises like that, it'd be secret code words from the KKK. Or that they do a fight in the oh god, is there something called the Red Dragon in the KKK? Is it Grand Wizard? I think that's another one. I think I'm getting these from South Park, could be wrong. Anyway, all of this caused the KKK to lose some credibility as the secret organisation in its area. Amongst its members, it really sort of it diminished their confidence in the organisation as a whole. It's totally unrelated, but it's a cool little tidbit, and I just thought I'd throw that in there. But regardless of whether Adam Worth was an anti-hero, he still did take something for himself, so he was a criminal, In the 1800s, we're led to believe that world travel were quite difficult, But it seems if you had the money and the influence, it was relatively easy to catch a ticket somewhere. But as a career criminal, you want to go unnoticed, don't you? You want to disappear in a puff of smoke, so to speak. I guess. I mean, Adam Worth took it literally, and I guess that's why he had his own 110-foot steam-powered yacht and a crew of about 20 people. Now, I don't know if these crew members ever partook directly in the crimes, but they must have been privy to it all at the very least. So he never left loose ends though, so maybe they had no idea at all. Maybe he lived all of these different lives and no one knew there was a crossover between them all. It's hard to find stuff out, it's hard to know because all these people are dead. I could also just make up whatever I wanted about him. Also helps, that he's nicknamed Napoleon as well. It solidifies that, doesn't it, if the guy's got his own boat. It was called the Shamrock as well. And it must have been lucky because without it, Adam would never have been able to steal $600,000 worth of uncut diamonds from South Africa. Well, speaking of lucky symbols though, I mean, it's not very often I get to do 2 clean segues to songs, and it's not squeaky clean. I'm probably going to have to explain it a little bit, maybe fucking shoehorn it in there. And it's not quite Horseshoe Gang either, so it's not even really about horseshoes and horseshoes being lucky and Shamrock being lucky, but it's kind of close enough for it to work anyway. And I guess it's more Horseshoe Gang than Horseshoe Gang's ever been, because now it's Horseshoe Gang plus their older brother King Crooked. So here's Horseshoe Gang and King Crooked together in their group that they call Family Business, and this is called Skip This Ad. There was a time in Adam Worth's life where he was living in very close proximity to the Prime Minister, and look at who's having dealings with the world leaders in modern times. It's your Epsteins and that. Now, I'm not going to make all this about Epstein for the next half hour. I'm probably not even really going to go into him that much, but he probably had his own boat and that, didn't he? He had his own island, so why wouldn't he have his own ferry or transportation system as well? Maybe even his own business of owning boats or something, But what if, and it's a fucking big what if, and the point, not everyone's going to be on board with this, but what if Epstein was similar to Adam Worth, a career criminal who made his livelihood playing the games of the rich and famous? He was involved with Prince Andrew, and Prince Andrew was reported in around 2010, 2009-ish. He was reported to be spending time with arms dealers and that, so I think we can assume that they're all bad people, regardless of any rape or paedophilia anyway. And if you're chilling with the fucking Lord of War, then odds are you're a dickhead, aren't you really? You're hoping to shoot someone or hoping to have someone shoot someone else, and you don't really get much more of a dickhead than that, especially someone who's got literally no worries in the world other than the worries that they make themselves because they're rich and fucking decide to make problems for everyone. So, but what if Epstein had just tried to scam too far? What if he had worked all of his life, well, part of his life, to try and unravel the fabric of high society? His houses, we're told, were filled with CCTV, like that guy in Happy, that TV show with the floating unicorn and that guy that looks like Trevor out of GTA 5. And I assume he had hours and hours of footage of celebrities and rich people fucking children and other people. And if he had ever planned to release that, he would have changed the world, mate. Like, even if he tried to be like, look at this, we all do it and it's fine. Even if he tried to do that, it would change the world, makes everyone go fucking mental. They're like, oh my god, there's so-and-so and he's balls deep in a 12-year-old, that's disgusting. Or there, look at her rubbing a groin on that 14-year-old lad's head. It doesn't matter what it is, it's still fucking wrong. But if he'd come out and done that, it wouldn't be like I can't help but think that the RICO laws in a way have played an important part with Epstein, because although he's not mob, is he, as far as we're aware, we're not being told he is, but with the RICO laws they can punish the higher ups for what the lower ups have done, and if they've made Epstein out to look like he's the top of this pyramid, then all the ones lower down don't particularly get punished. The one at the top gets punished for it, so that Epstein can then be punished for all of their discretions, all of their crimes, their everything they've done wrong can all be laid at Epstein's feet. He can be fucked off, maybe even fucking literally kills himself, or fakes his own suicide, or they fake his suicide and be like, oh, thanks for taking one for the team. Speaking of taking one for the team, here's 14-year-old Denise. We've just picked her up from Manchester. She was walking round, a bit of a stray. Here's a van. Maybe that's what they did. I don't know if that's what they did, but it's important to remember that the media, both mainstream and social media, are controlled by the very people that Epstein was supposedly involved with. Even by saying he was involved with them is enough to sully his name. But how come all these people involved aren't seen as just as dirty as Epstein? That's weird, isn't it? That's weird that there's no... Well, all of these people are as dirty as him. It's just him. Like, he's the scapegoat. He's the tip of the Rico pyramid. It's bizarre. It's weird, though, isn't it? Like, and calling back to Adam Worth, saying, he had superpowers. Do you know what other career criminal who was involved with high society, but just in the UK instead of America? Jimmy Savile, mate. And some people believe that he was a warlock, a wizard. And what if he was? Or what if he had an understanding of the human psyche, or the way that society and the human psyche works that other people just hadn't grasped? He had a natural understanding of that. Would that class as a superpower? Now, I know that there seems to have been a lot of crazy people who have insane levels of charisma and charm. And I don't understand, if you're really charismatic and charming, do you become insane because of the way the world starts to treat you? Or if you're really insane, do people find that endearing? And they're like, he's quite charming, isn't he? When really he's just as mad as a box of frogs, But you think, he's lovely, because he does one nice thing for someone, and then the rest of the time he's fucking batshit mental. But that might be quite endearing. That might be where some of the charisma and charm comes from. But I know it's difficult to accept that a notorious paedophile must have charm, but they must do to a certain extent, because the ones that are super good at it, they seem to permeate society and even seemingly bend it to their will, almost like a fucking warlock would. Plus, you've got the fact that Jimmy Savile looks like, when a kid makes a character on, like, say, like fucking Saints Row 2 or The Sims or something, or even, any Saints Row game, anyone where you can make your own avatar, and they make it look really fucking weird and then max out the stats, so you've got this weird looking creature who's just super strong and super good at talking, but pisses themselves all the time on The Sims, and they've got no hygiene or because they've done what they thought was important. What if that's what's happened in some really weird, genetic way? Like, instead of having all of everything, just a little bit of everything, like everyone seems to have, for some reason their genes have just gone fucking full on charisma, full on that side, full on sex drive, and then like fucking hygiene and fashion sense and all of that stuff just goes out the window. Anyway, I've got a Jimmy Savile episode planned. I do want to go into that, and that might even be a two-parter, because that is one of my favourite places to go to on the internet. Not obviously not fucking like not like kiddie porn, but it's my favourite place to go on the internet. Is that corner of the internet where people believe that Jimmy Savile was a wizard. That's one of my favourite. That's my favourite dingy spot in YouTube. Finding what people have put there. It's probably fucking bonkers, but it is fun. Anyway, I hadn't really planned up on bringing either Jimmy or Jeffrey into this, and I don't really know where to go. So this is a song about the latter. It's Mr. Traumatic and BB. This is Epstein. Back to Adam Worth. It'd appear he had some seemingly legal business endeavours too, though, like racehorses. He would often claim he made a lot of money through legal gambling, a story helped along by his casino aboard the Shamrock. Now, I could go into his crimes and that, but you'd probably never heard of him before today, so I thought I'd look into other notable characters who are based off historical characters. Third, we got... Well, actually, no. You know what? I will tell you a couple of his crimes. So, the one that stands out, I was getting into it before, and I was setting the mood, and I was like, it's a misty evening, and there's prostitutes on the corner, and I never actually told you what he fucking did, so... He used Junker Phillips, was it? I think it was Junker Phillips, his name. Not really important. Junker is the 7-foot lad, and they go into the gallery at midnight, and it's mad. Adam allegedly climbs up Junker's back onto his shoulders, and then Junker Phillips grabs him, I imagine by the rib cage, and just lifts him like we'd left a pillowcase, like fucking Rafiki lifted Simba at the start of The Lion King. Just lifts him like that up to the picture. Adam whips out a knife, cuts the painting out of the Duchess of Devonshire, that was the name of the painting, and it was of that. It was of the Duchess of Devonshire, obviously, and she was a bit of a tart. Turns out she was having it off with everyone, but men and women, which was frowned upon back then apparently. He cut it out, rolled it up dead tight, and then travelled the world with it for a while, hidden in his walking cane, stuffed down the trouser leg. Obviously this pissed off Junker because he thought he was going to get money from it. He never truly sold it, and he just sort of kept it in his back pocket. It's not his real back pocket, although probably once or twice he maybe did, but proverbial back pocket in a storage facility in America somewhere. He kept hold of it until his dealings with the Pinkertons. But that's one of his crimes anyway, and that's considered one of his most heinous because it seems to be one of the most important as well. But it seems as we started with an Arthur Conan Doyle character, we might as well polish the other side of the coin. And with Moriarty's nemesis was the good guy Sherlock Holmes, a character originally portrayed with superhuman strength, which is a literal superpower, adding credence to my personal theory about there being superhumans knocking about, whether the demigods or mutants or alien human hybrids. Sherlock Holmes was based upon a pen pal of Sir Arthur's by the name of Joseph Bell, a Scottish surgeon who was famed for saying stuff like observation is key when diagnosing patients, an ethos that Doyle took forward in his fictional writings of Holmes and Watson. Now, it's worth saying that when he did come out and say it was Joseph Bell that I based it on because of his things he was saying about observation is key and these little tidbits he would give me, it's worth noting that Joseph Bell wasn't overly keen. He was a little flattered, but he didn't truly believe that Sherlock Holmes was based upon himself. He thought it was actually Arthur Conan Doyle had based Sherlock Holmes on himself, but didn't want to say that because in case he looked like a bit of a dickhead or something, big-headed and egotistical. But not everyone is as disparaging, I think is the word, towards being related to a fictional character. It is probably not much of a surprise to learn that James Bond characters are based off of real life people most of the time. For example, in Goldfinger himself was based off of a bloke that Ian Fleming had met. The man himself, Charles W. Engelhard, was trying to use the bank established by Ian Fleming's granddad. Not like a regular person, a lot like trying to put 10 quid in his fucking kid's saving account, his grandkid's saving account, around like a fucking decent person would. But he was actually trying to use it to avoid taxation laws and break exploitation laws from South Africa. He wanted to bend the rules, like any regular wealthy person. 47 years after Adam Worth's death, Charlie Boy was trying to get South Africa's export laws surrounding bullion, and he was trying to get around them, like fucking, I don't know, it makes me think, was it, if the exploitation laws were already there, fair enough, but were they in place because Adam Worth stole $600,000 worth of uncut diamonds from South Africa? Did they then need these export laws because so much money had been paid, potentially removed from that country, and power had just been given to someone else? Or was it these laws have always been in place and it was easier to have a criminal go and rob them rather than trying to export them legally, because you wouldn't have to really worry about exploitation laws if they've been stolen, because then it's just stolen goods. So I think that would be easier to do, really, than dealing with the paperwork and the loss of money, I imagine, and the loss of profit. And they probably had rules to say you can't take this much out, but I can't help but wondering if Adam Worth was more of a mercenary, a brain for hire, and because he works, it seems, in these massive jobs, and if you were doing that for yourself, you're either doing it for the fun of it or you really need the money, and I couldn't see what he was using the money for, unless one source says he just used the money to pay for his next job that he was doing, his next robbery, so he must have just really loved that lifestyle. But what makes this connection even stranger, is that Charles Engelhard is known to have helped build the economies in 3 of the main places that Adam Worth was also involved in: America, the United Kingdom, and South Africa. It turns out they had common interests too. They both owned a selection of racehorses. Not many people own racehorses, do they? And have connections in America, the UK, and South Africa, and deal in moving massive quantities of expensive stock around the world. He was also the real life Goldfinger, that is. He made his money in the gold and silver industry, as you probably guessed, by him trying to move bullion. And he was very, very proud to have been the inspiration for Goldfinger in the movie. So much so that he started to call his flight attendant on his private plane Pussy Galore. Now, one of the more terrifying characters that's based on a real person is Hannibal Lecter. Now, I know you probably think, Jason Voorhees was probably based on someone, and Freddy Krueger must be based on someone, an evil paedophile who can shapeshift and inhabit your dreams. Maybe loosely based on someone, perhaps like Norman Bates might be based on someone, probably is, I'd have thought, to be fair. But Hannibal Lecter, you'd think he's just made up, drinking brains through a straw and that, but no, he was actually based initially everyone was told he was based on a Dr. Salazar, but it turns out this doctor's completely fictitious and made up. The real doctor that he was based on was actually in prison. He was a Mexican doctor by the name of Dr. Alfredo Trevino, and he was in prison for murder. So what's weirder is, and what makes me actually question reality itself this week, is he was released. Now, obviously people get released from prison all the time, that happens, but what's weird is he was released in 1981, and that's the year that Red Dragon was released as a novel. So he was released from prison just in time for a book to be released about his namesake, or his alter ego, if you like, that had been created around him, Hannibal Lecter. Now that's fucking weird, isn't it? What a weird coincidence. Now I think it's worth mentioning as well that these backstories are very coincidental. They almost seem perfect, don't they? Like it's these stories, and the stories themselves that people have written, the novels, they've lasted for generations. Like Hannibal the Cannibal, 40 years. Sherlock and Moriarty have been fighting each other for the past 100 years, and Goldfinger was written in the 40s, so that's 60 years old, 70, 80 years old now. That's a long time, isn't it? They've lasted a while, and I can't. With these backstories of where the characters came from, have they been developed later on as people have maybe started to think, well, I don't really like these because they're not based much in truth. Where's the truth to this? This is a bit ridiculous, it's hard to follow, it's hard to believe. So maybe it's just been redacted in a sense. Maybe it's rewritten every year to try and cater for the redactions that are made by the men in black, the time police, the people that supposedly, or the creatures that supposedly watch over the timeline and make sure everything goes properly and goes as it should do. And maybe they're like, well, these stories are really important that we keep these stories going, but they're not really going to fit into this time now anymore because everyone wants truth, and they want more truth than what's actually true. So if we tell them that it's all based on truth, then maybe they'll still buy into it and enjoy it, and we don't have to worry about people making up new stories or that anymore. Maybe they're just rewritten because it sounds better and helps them sell more books, which leads me on nicely to that remix that I promised before, speaking about things being rewritten. This is Wrote My Way Out, again, but this time by Royster59, Joyner Lucas, Black Thought, and Hello Black. So, that was a song originally written about a writer, rewritten by writers about themselves as writers. Oh, as well, I forgot to mention that when Dr. Alfredo was released, he went on to continue practicing medicine, which makes him even fucking scarier than actual Hannibal Lecter himself. Fucking truly terrifying me, because he's just getting about there, and he's back to being a doctor, mate, and he killed his partner, and I don't know if it was his lover or if it was his business partner or another doctor, I'm not too sure, but anyway, another character that everyone knows is Scrooge McDuck. Now, Scrooge McDuck, everyone knows him. He's a character that was loosely based off of a character in this old story written by a guy called is it Charles? I can't remember. The character's called Ebenezer Scrooge, and it's a Christmas Carol. It's not Charles Darwin. Charles Dickens, mate. Charles Dickens. Fuck me. You can see that it's obvious that my script isn't really up to much in it. But Scrooge McDuck was loosely based off of Charles Dickens' character, Ebenezer Scrooge, and Ebenezer Scrooge himself was based off of a politician, John Elway's. That's Elwes. And I don't know much about him, I didn't really look into him, but I love the idea of someone making a TV show based upon other politicians from now. So imagine if someone was like, oh, I'm gonna make this character and I'm gonna base him purely off like Edward Pickles. So it's just this big fella, kind of balding, looks the part, kind of looks like a balding Dr. Robotnik from Sonic. I don't think he would need to try and destroy the moon or anything, but it'd just be nice to know that there's another Mr. Pickles out there who isn't a demonic dog or an actual politician. But I mean, who would you who's around now or been around recently? Who would you make a villain based around? I mean, I think you could get a really good story, like a sort of fantastical, closely based to what some people believe is true, story about Tony Blair and Saddam Hussein and George Bush, and about how they were all fighting to get access to the stargates that Saddam Hussein had found and gained access to through his collection of antique scripture that he was collecting supposedly from the ancient Sumerians and from, fucking Mesopotamia, which is where, well, Mesopotamia is still where Mesopotamia supposedly was. It's just buried underneath. God, I want to say Iraq, but it could be Iran, I don't know. I think it was Iraq, Saddam Hussein, wasn't it? I could be wrong, but wherever Saddam Hussein was the dictator of, supposedly he had access to stargates because that's where Mesopotamia was, and that's what they used to use. So it would make sense that there would be someone fighting for access to these stargates from Middle East to get to America, to be able to just step through them and teleport to somewhere else, But I mean, you could have it based on other people. I think it'd be a good film to be made off of Andrew Tikhotilov, the Russian serial killer. He used to get whipped a lot as a kid and that, and he was a proper fucking dark bastard. But you could. What about like Joe? I'd love to see a film about Joseph Callinger with his floating head Charlie, and base a super villain off him. There's loads to be done. I don't get why people aren't doing new things, mate. They're just always basing it on something that's already existed. It's remakes and remakes. But anyway, I'm all. Do you reckon there are more or less Adam Worths in existence now? As laws have become stricter, have they become rarer? Or is it easier to be a criminal when there are more laws in place? It's harder to call, but it's got to be likely that there are a lot more criminals performing a wider variety of crimes now, because there are more crimes in existence. I mean, obviously, I think I mentioned before about the cattle wrangling and stuff like that. That's not going to really exist that much or as widespread now. Not in like Western society, I wouldn't have thought, but maybe a bit in America every now and then. But there's more crimes to be committed and a lot more ways to get caught committing the said crimes. Maybe though there's a whole network of mercenary type criminals just below the highest levels of society. They've got the money of the high society, but not really the care or the influence of the high society, just the skills to get shit done, like bad shit, And they're performing tasks for the richest people, like in the Punisher series. A TV show's just there to teach a few of us that what the world is really like, and to show us how the world actually works. The idea of drip feeding us information is something I play with a lot, but maybe it's not a mythological 13th creature from last week, like, the 13th member of the Majestic 12 or whatever, but maybe we find out little bits because the people producing these pieces of media are actually criminals. Like in GTA 5 when you play as Michael and you get to produce a film and that, and you get to put your name on it, and it's obviously it becomes a money laundering thing for you potentially, but it means that they've got a little bit of a say, and if they want to get a message in there, they could, if they hide it very well. They're not, I'm saying the criminals, but what if they're like lovable criminals, the true anti-heroes, teaching us what they can, dropping little breadcrumbs for us to pick up as we can, as and where we find them, giving us the direction to look in, but maybe not the distance to travel in, and that's why people get lost down these so-called rabbit holes. Maybe we just have to take the cues given to us by the world, follow them, collate them, and collate them with other people's findings regularly, and teach everyone about what we've learned. Now, you might not want to do that, but I will. I'll happily do that. I'm Jack, the world around you, and this has been Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. Who was he? Adam Worth. Is he still alive? Is he immortal? Was he doing it all for good reasons? Was he like a demigod? Is it more likely that there is a Batman character out there who is just a rich do-gooder? Are they still alive? Will their story live on? This is Living Legends. I'm the world around you, and you're listening to The Man Who Sold the World Part 2 on Threshold FM.